you need help in overcoming your porn addiction. Why? Because your flesh is fallen. It is loving sin, and it will take advantage of sin by using the eyes, using the imagination to feed the flesh. And you cannot mortify it by yourself. You need God's help, and that's why you need God's language. Jared Moore, concocting a list of 10 myths about lust, can be used as a helpful tool to reorient our thinking on our sin issues. And this hurts because it makes you sound a lot worse than just somebody who has a porn addiction. I mean, I'm so helpless. It's an addiction. It's interesting that the medical community isn't looking for a medicinal solution for your addiction problem. Why? Because there isn't one. I don't care how your brain synapses, how it works chemically. The reality is the Bible describes looking at a woman with lust as adultery of the heart. That means that we have a sin problem, not an addiction issue. Let yourself get thumped by that fact, and then we can turn to the Bible, which happens to deal not with the issue of addictions, never uses the term, but it sure does talk a lot about lust. Job made a covenant with his eyes to not look upon a woman with lust. He cut a deal with his own body. I am not going to let these eyes look upon a young lady so that I can lust upon her. I am going to avert my eyes immediately. Why did he do that? He could have just said, Lord, I do have an addiction after all. No, he labeled it biblically. It was lust. It was looking at something that doesn't belong to you and seeking it for your own pleasure, which, by the way, would also be covetousness. It would also be a violation of, well, pretty much every commandment there is. Why? Because it is not a medical problem you have. It is a sin issue. Let's take our beating, shall we? From Jared Moore, myth number 4, I lust because I desire marriage. No, you lust because you desire sexual immorality. Stop with the excuses. Myth number 5. I lust because I cannot help it, you say. No, you lust because you willfully choose sin over holiness. Truth number 1 in myth number 5. In one sense, you cannot overcome your sin problem, but in a biblical sense, you can. All by yourself, you can't do it. But with the power of the Spirit, you can. How does he work? Well, he convicts of sin, righteousness, and of judgment. That means if you're simply calling your porn issue an addiction, the Holy Spirit doesn't work with addictions. He works with sin problems. Label it, claim it, because by yourself you can't overcome it, but with him you are an overcomer. Furthermore, in myth number 5, if you will remember this principle, when you are tempted, you're looking at the screen and you're thinking, I don't know if I can overcome. I sure hope I can overcome this. Consider what you're doing. You are either sowing to the flesh and you're going to reap it, or you're going to sow to the Spirit. In other words, you are going to choose sin or holiness. You are going to follow the devil and believe his lies, or you're going to believe God, follow him because he speaks the truth, and it is always better to pursue holiness and not give in to the flesh. Stop calling it stupid worldly names. When you are thinking about sinning, you are considering sin versus holiness, worshiping the devil or worshiping God. You say, what? How did worship get dragged into this? Sin is a worship decision. Every time you're confronted with a temptation, you are going to choose to worship self, to worship the devil by doing what he is deceiving you into thinking is a good idea, or you're going to worship God. And you do that because that is the orientation of your heart. If you are constantly seeking, desiring to worship God, then you are going to desire the things that he desires for you. So when you don't do that, your worship is getting aimed away from him and onto another object. That object is the devil. Yikes! That's what I'm doing? And this isn't just porn. This is anger. This is when you're sinfully anxious. This is when you're not considering God and you're tempted to do something that you know isn't biblical. You are making a worship decision. That is biblical language for what confronts you every single time you're tempted. Is this drubbing done? No, it's not. And we should allow ourselves to be beaten by the Bible until we recognize, all right, I'm done. I surrender. I'm going to just stop thinking in these humanistic terms, and I am going to start thinking biblically. Then, and only then, will you find hope, will you find power, and will you find joy. Good evening, my fellow totally depraved Americans.